this is going to be a cabinet kitchen. And it's going to have two sections. One is shorter than the other, or doesn't come as far down as the other. I'm doing it this way because if I do make two separate cabinets, and I'm losing, an inch or two of storage space between the two cabinets, and I don't know. Plus, I have to use another piece of plywood. This way, I can make one big cabinet with two sections. This is going to have adjustable shelves here, and this will have adjustable shelves here. The next thing I have to do this way is to cut the holes for the pinholes, the shelf pinholes, these things. These are the shelf pins. So, this will be a series down here, and this is going to be a series down each side. I will have to offset the holes so that they don't end up drilling through the plywood. So these holes will be, say, maybe an inch back from the front edge, but over here they'll be back maybe 1 1/4 inches from the front edge, and also offset the same way on the back edge, so that way, because the shelf pin holes will be in the same orientation on both sides, and if I don't offset them, they're going to go a hole straight through the cabinet wall, which is maybe not catastrophic, but just not what I feel like having. Where's my shelf pins? Right here. I made a shelf pin jig a long time ago, probably 15 years ago, maybe 10. Anyway, it uses a collar on the router to ride fit in these holes, and it plunges a 1/4 inch router bit into that hole, and the router bit is kind of toasty, cheap bit. The bit I have here is a down cut bit, meaning that as the bit spins, the flutes are oriented such that they are cutting downward, and I selected the bit that way because that way, if it was an upcut bit, it would pull the fibers on the face of the plywood would pull them up. By having a down cut one, then it pushes the fibers from the face of the plywood into the plywood, so you get a cleaner opening to the hole. This jig works like this. I have a positive stop here at the bottom. It works on both sides, so that oriented like this, and I clamp it in place. I route out the holes that I want on this edge, and then for that edge, I flip it over and route out the holes that I want on that edge. That way, these holes with positive registration against the bottom of the cabinet side, these holes will match these holes. Now, I could register the jig against the bottom edge or the top edge. It doesn't matter which way you do it, but I have to make sure that I do it the same way all the time. So that if I'm rinsing off the top, then I'm always rinsing off the top for that entire cabinet. Or off the bottom, and rinsing off the bottom of the cabinet. These two faces here will be facing each other inside the less tall cabinet, we'll say. So, for that reason, because this one is not as tall, it starts, because this, what's going to happen here is if you what I'm doing here, the reason why this cabinet here is not going to be as tall as cabinet to the right, my right, is because this is where there's going to be a shelf I'm going to have for our microwave. So that's why this cabinet doesn't come down from the ceiling as far as these cabinets, this cabinet goes. So, these are going to be facing each other this way. And these will be facing these this way, okay? So, when I'm routing the pinholes for the shelf pinholes on these two, it's going to go like this. I'm going to have registering against the bottom edge. I'll route these holes, and I'll route those holes. And then I'll route these holes, and then I'll route those holes. And that way, all of the pinholes on both sides will match, and there won't be any wonky rocking of the shelf when it's sitting on the shelf pinholes. Now, on this one here, if I register off the bottom, well, now I gotta try to figure out where I need to put the shelf pinholes on this side. So for that reason, the top edge of this is gonna match the top edge of these. So for this side and this side, I'm gonna register off the top edge so that these shelf pinholes will then match these shelf pinholes that are over here. So hopefully that makes sense. These are too confusing. If it is, stick around, maybe it'll make sense. I will start with this one and this one. That's the face that I'm registering from the top. Maybe I'll register all of them from the top, just to stay consistent, so I don't get myself confused. Because that is an easy thing for me to do. So, and on this jig, I have the shelf pinholes spaced about 1 inch on center from the edge of this edge of the jig. So if I put this edge of the jig flush with the front edge of the cabinet side, then the shelf pins will be 1 inch on center from the edge of this cabinet side. That's not including the face frame that's going to go on there. So, next thing I need to do is determine where I want to go with the shelf pins. The shelf pins don't have to go all the way down to the bottom of the shelf or the cabinet side, because you're not going to have the shelf 1 inch off the bottom, most likely. Maybe some people would want that for some reason. I don't want that. So I'm going to go about 6 inches off the bottom, which is going to put me on this mark here. Here's my router with the collar. So if I put that collar into that hole, hard to know where to start and stop. So, I've been thinking about putting like positive stops on here, you know, but blue tape works. So put blue tape right there and know that I don't want to bring this router down any further than this point. That's for my bottom, almost bottom shelf. The 6 inches is even kind of low, but it's a good height for like coffee cups, I guess. I want to put those on the bottom of the shelf, I don't know. So, and up here, that I can go to the, I think it is top wall of this. Now I can reach the top hole on this, but do I really want a shelf that's going to be 4 inches down from the top edge? No. I'm thinking 8 inches down from the top. So then that's the range of shelf pin holes that I want to do. This here is the registration mark, so to speak. Right? The other thing about this is that it's important to have your router bed centered on this car as much as possible, which it pretty much is. But there's still to be some, like maybe 1/100 of an inch or so of variance in one direction or one axis or another. So what I do is I have marked on here top pointing this way. So that way, regardless if I register this shelf pin jig on the top edge or the bottom edge of the cabinet side, I always have this pointed to the top. If this is the top, then I'm turning the router around and working on it from the back side of the router, which is not uncomfortable for me. I'm fine with this. This in place now. Sometimes if it's not going to be visible because it's going to be covered by another cabinet piece or something, I'll actually just secure this in place with a screw and that'll hold it in place for me. But yeah. So let's be good there. Start it there. Look at it there. You have to watch out for the sand up there because it's going to get gray. I might have to turn this a little bit just to clear the plate. All right. I wear earmuffs, and I like to wear gripper gloves to improve my hold on the router. So it's less likely to move around on me. And away we go. nice clean hole. Nice clean edge on the holes. Now I'm going to flip this around, which means I need to flip this around. So where this is off the top. I was remiss to mention that these holes, the shelf pin holes I have here are set, are made at 1 inch apart, center. And the other point about this. The 1 inch apart, and there was another point I had, I don't know what it was, and it must have been a while. Oh, the other point is I have had projects where I didn't do the shelf pin hole on every single one. Instead of doing one every inch, I did one like every 2 inches, you know. So, depending on the project, I may or may not want shelves that are adjustable by the inch, times 2 inches or more of adjustment between shelves is enough, if that makes sense. You know, I don't need to adjust a shelf pin or shelf on a project by the inch. Sometimes 1 inch is sufficient. Flush with the edge, and looking at the top as well as here. I don't always have to put a hammer on it, but I noticed it was just not quite right there, so I got it right. So this is the top of the workpiece, top of the cabinet side. So this is pointing to the top. Actually, I forgot to post about these shelf pins that I have. You notice these shelf pins have how should I say, a notch profile to them. The shelf sits on them. That's how they usually work, right? Sometimes, though, a shelf might twist and it's not registering on all 4 pins correctly, in which case I'll just take one of these pins and I'll turn it over like that. And a lot of times that corrects any rock in the shelf, a rocker shelf. All right.